The morning air was razor-sharp, thick with the scent of pine and frost. Snow blanketed the forest floor like a burial shroud, untouched and glistening beneath the soft gray light of a northern winter dawn. Among the towering conifers of the northern woods, silence reigned, until it didn't. A gust of wind shifted the treetops, and with it came movement. Swift, silent, coordinated. Wolves, 5 of them, sleek and hungry, padded through the underbrush with practiced precision. Their breath misted before them, eyes glowing with intensity. They moved with a collective rhythm, snouts low, ears alert. They hadn't eaten in 2 days. This hunt mattered. The alpha, a scarred gray male with a torn ear, paused. He had caught it. A scent. He raised his muzzle to the wind. Prey. Close. Fresh. He gave no sound, no signal. He didn't need to. The others spread out without a word, forming a crescent, every muscle tensed. Not far ahead, beneath the low-hanging limbs of a snow-covered pine, a bobcat crouched. Her flanks rose and fell rapidly. Her ears twitched, every instinct screaming danger. Her fur bristled. She crouched protectively in front of a hollow beneath a fallen log, just big enough for one. Inside the hollow, her kit trembled, tiny, barely weaned, his large ears folded back in fear, his paws tucked tightly under him, eyes wide and confused. His world was only his mother, the steady thrum of her breath, the soft rumble of her purr, the warmth of her body against his own. Now, the world was shaking, and death was near. The first wolf lunged from the trees. The bobcat exploded upward with a snarl, claws unsheathed. She met the attack midair, slashing at the wolf's muzzle. Blood sprayed against the snow. The wolf yelped but didn't retreat. The others closed in. She fought like a storm, her compact body twisted with fury, teeth bared, claws striking with precision born from desperation. She landed atop one, raking its back, then sprang to another, snarling and hissing, refusing to let them near the log. For a moment, she held them back. For a moment, she looked invincible. But there were 5. A second wolf clamped down on her hind leg. She screeched in pain, twisting, biting its neck. A third rammed her from the side, knocking her off balance. Her blood hit the snow in dark bursts. Her breath came ragged, frosted. Still, she rose again. Still, she stood between them and her child. The wolves were ruthless now. One grabbed her by the shoulder, shaking. Another lunged at her exposed side. She screamed, a sound that tore through the forest like a warning bell. Then, at last, she fell. She didn't rise. The wolves dragged her limp body away, their tails high in victory, her blood leaving a red trail across the white canvas of the forest floor. From beneath the log, the kit did not move. He didn't breathe, not for a long time. It was minutes, maybe more, before silence returned. No crunching snow, no low growls, just the steady hush of the forest, as though it hadn't just witnessed the end of a mother's fight. The kit stirred. His small head emerged from the hollow, ears flattened. He peered out at the now stained snow. No wolves, no mother, only torn fur and scattered drops of red. He crept out slowly, paws trembling. His legs were weak beneath him. He stumbled once, then righted himself. He sniffed the air. She was gone. The cold hit him fully then, not just on his fur, but inside, a deep, hollow chill that made him press himself into the snow, as if willing the earth to open and swallow him whole. He let out a cry. Small, hoarse. Then another. It echoed strangely between the trees, high and broken. He wandered in a small circle near the log, sniffing the air frantically, mewling. His coat bristled with fear. His eyes were wild, searching for the warmth that had always been there. The steady breath, the calming hum, the body he curled against every night. Now, there was only wind. And cold. He cried louder. Again. Again. Until the sound became a wail, piercing and raw. But no one came. No bobcat. No pack. No mother. The wind began to rise, carrying flakes across the clearing. The bobcat kit curled under a bush, tucking his face between his paws, trying to vanish into the cold. But sleep did not come. Only memories, brief flashes. His mother nuzzling his side, her tail curling protectively over him, her soft hums in the dark. And then, the snarl. The snow, her body vanishing. He whimpered. Above, the clouds thickened. Snow began to fall again. Slowly, like ashes from a dying sky. The trees watched in stillness. And the bobcat kit, nameless and alone, huddled beneath a bush as the first full night of his life without her fell across the forest. The path that cut through pinewood forest was barely visible now, swallowed by the thick drifts of winter snow. Only someone who knew the land intimately could follow it. Fortunately, Thomas Whitaker had walked it for over 40 years. He moved slowly, carefully, the crunch of his boots muffled beneath the weight of frost. A camera hung around his neck. Binoculars were slung across his chest. His gloved hand held a walking stick, worn smooth at the handle. His breath came in slow puffs of vapor, and his eyes scanned the trees with quiet curiosity. Thomas wasn't hunting, not anymore. He hadn't fired a gun in decades. These days, he hunted with lenses. He paused at a clearing near a stand of spruce. Raising his binoculars, a red fox darted across the snow in the distance, slim and swift. He smiled, noting the direction, but something else caught his attention. Near the base of a pine tree. He saw it. Not movement, not fur, color. A smear of red. Blood on snow. He lowered the binoculars slowly. His stomach clenched. Years of experience kicked in. He moved off the trail, careful not to make noise. He approached the spot slowly, eyes tracking, breath steady. More blood, drag marks, scattered paw prints, too large for a rabbit. Canine, maybe 5 or 6 sets. Wolves, and something else, smaller prints. Feline, uneven, wavering. He followed them. The forest grew quieter, the pines denser. Then, ahead, at the foot of a collapsed tree trunk. He saw it. At first, it looked like a heap of fur in the snow. But then it moved. A small body, curled tightly beside the torn remains of a larger one. The fur of the mother bobcat was matted with blood and half covered in fresh snowfall. Her body was limp, her throat torn, her eyes frozen wide. Beside her, barely more than a shadow against the white, the kit shivered. Its ears were pinned back, its face buried beneath a twitching foreleg. Its breathing was shallow, but it was alive. Thomas stopped. He didn't approach right away. The little one sensed him instantly. It lifted its head slowly, blinking at the figure in the snow. Its pupils shrank. Its lips pulled back, revealing tiny teeth. A soft, hoarse growl rose from its throat. Not a threat, but a warning born of sheer terror. Thomas raised both hands slowly and knelt. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "Easy now." The growl deepened for a moment. But the kit was too weak to move, too cold to flee. Thomas could see the animal's sides rising and falling rapidly. A heart working far too hard for a body so small. The eyes were wide, wild, yet beneath the fear, he saw something else. Not fight, not fury, desperation. A cry for help that could no longer be voiced. Thomas sighed softly and unzipped his coat. From his pack, he pulled out an old wool blanket, the one he always carried in winter in case of injury or a long stay in the woods. He approached slowly, inch by inch. "It's all right. You've done enough. You're safe now." He laid the blanket beside the kit. The little bobcat tried to back away, pressing into its mother's cold fur, mewling faintly. "I know. You don't want to leave her," Thomas whispered. "But she's gone, little one. You're not." He reached out carefully, scooping the small, trembling body into the blanket. The kit resisted weakly, scratching at the air, whimpering, but Thomas wrapped him securely, holding him close to his chest. Warmth. A heartbeat. The little one stilled. Thomas looked down at the face peeking from the folds, snow clinging to whiskers. Eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. "You shouldn't have seen that," he murmured, brushing snow from its brow. "No creature should." The wind shifted again. Thomas stood. The kit pressed to his chest. He glanced at the mother's body, eyes full of sorrow. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her. "He won't be alone." He turned and began walking back through the snow-covered path, one arm around the wrapped bundle, the other holding his stick. It was nearly dusk when they reached the cabin. Thomas lived just beyond the ridge, tucked into a thicket of birch and spruce. His home more workshop than house, walls lined with field guides, hand-labeled photographs, and antique equipment. The hearth was already burning, logs cracking cheerfully. He laid the kit gently on a towel near the fire. The little one stirred, tail twitching weakly, but made no effort to flee. Thomas fetched a bowl and warmed a mix of goat's milk and water, testing the temperature on his wrist like a nurse. Then he dipped a cloth and brought it to the bobcat's mouth. At first, nothing. Then, slowly, the kit began to suckle. Thomas smiled for the first time that day. "That's it," he said softly. "There you go, little survivor." He didn't try to touch it again that night. He just watched, occasionally feeding, replacing damp towels, adding logs to the fire, humming old songs that filled the silences between wind gusts outside. The kit cried once before sleep. A low, broken mule. Thomas moved closer. He wrapped another layer of wool around him. Then sat beside the fire and whispered, "I'm here now. You're not alone." That night, as the storm moved in, a man and a Bobcat kit slept side by side on the wooden floor of a warm cabin while snow blanketed the world in silence. The wooden cabin nestled at the edge of the pinewoods had always been quiet, filled with the sounds of creaking floorboards, the occasional wind brushing against its walls, and the soft crackle of fire. But in the days that followed the storm, a new sound joined the stillness, the steady, delicate rhythm of life returning. The Bobcat kitten, rescued and wrapped in blankets, now lay curled in a padded wooden box near the hearth, its sides rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. A small knitted cap covered one ear, Thomas's improvisation to keep it warm after a near-freezing night. It was the third day. Thomas knelt beside the fire, adjusting the hot water bottle beneath the bedding. Then he gently lifted the kitten and checked its paws. The frostbite hadn't taken. That was a miracle in itself. "You're a fighter," he said softly, brushing a thumb along the kit's cheek. He paused, thought for a moment, then said, "Kaya, that's what I'll call you." The kitten twitched slightly. "Kaya," he repeated, with a small smile, means, small but strong, in the old tongue. "I think it fits." Mornings at the cabin were slower now. Thomas would rise at dawn, stoke the fire, then carefully measure out warmed goat's milk into a rubber-tipped bottle. Kaya, though still weak, had begun to perk up. Her ears twitched at the sounds of footfalls. Her nose flared at the scent of the milk. She still didn't trust his hands completely, but hunger overcame fear. Feeding her required patience. Thomas sat on the floor, holding the bottle at just the right angle. Sometimes she turned away, too stubborn to accept help. Other times, she drank slowly, paws curled against his wrist as if anchoring herself to the world again. After feeding, Thomas cleaned her eyes with a warm cloth and gently applied a drop of medicine to each one. She blinked, snorted, and tried to shake it off every time, but her vision cleared with each day. And then there were the stories. Each evening, Thomas would sit beside the hearth, his back against a patchwork cushion, and tell her stories in a quiet, steady voice. Tales of the forest, of stars, of his late wife's garden, of a fox named Roo who once outsmarted a hunter. Sometimes, he read aloud, his favorite books with frayed covers and soft, warm pages. Kaya didn't understand the words, but she came to know the cadence, the warmth, the gentle rumble of his voice in the dark. Some nights, when the wind howled and she couldn't sleep, he would play music, old records, simple folk melodies, violin and piano, never loud, just enough to soothe. Kaya, still wild at heart, would lie stiff at first, alert and uncertain, but as the minutes passed, she would settle, her eyes would drift half-closed, her body would unfurl, tail twitching softly. Eventually, she began to inch closer to him. First it was a cautious paw on the edge of his boot. Then, one night, she curled in the crook of his leg. resting her head gently against his knee. Thomas didn't move. He only smiled and kept reading. Weeks passed. The snow thickened outside, but inside the cabin, a kind of spring slowly began to bloom. Kaya's strength returned. Her coat grew lusher, the patches of roughness smoothing into a healthy shine. Her legs, once too weak to stand, carried her in little bounding hops around the hearth. She still spooked easily. Sudden noises, loud wind gusts, or the sound of boots on wood could send her darting under the bed. But she always came back out. She always found Thomas again. One afternoon, she chased a scrap of cloth Thomas tied to a string, pouncing and rolling with kittenish abandon, when she accidentally tumbled into a pile of pillows and let out a startled chirp. Thomas laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "You've got a spirit in you," he said, and Kaya chuffed in response. A breathy sound that could almost have been a laugh of her own. In the evenings, Kaya began to choose where she slept. Not in the box anymore. Not by the fire. But curled against Thomas's side. The first time it happened, he was dozing off in his chair, a book half fallen from his hand. He woke to the soft weight of fur against his ribs. Kaya had climbed onto the chair, folded herself into his lap, and was now fast asleep. He didn't move for hours. Didn't want to break the moment. It was no longer just about survival. It was belonging. Visitors to the cabin were few. But one afternoon, a ranger named Marla passed through to check on trail conditions and supplies. She knocked lightly and stepped in, brushing snow from her coat. She froze when she saw Kaya, who stood on the windowsill, watching her with alert yellow eyes. "That a lynx?" "No," Thomas said. "Bobcat." Marla blinked. "You're raising a bobcat?" Thomas chuckled. "More like cohabiting with one. She's calm. She's learning," he replied, "and I think she's decided I'm tolerable." Marla stepped slowly closer, careful not to crowd the animal. Kaya didn't growl. She didn't run. She just watched. "You've done something special here," Marla said, voice quiet. "Most wouldn't have survived." "She almost didn't," Thomas replied. He didn't explain more. He didn't need to. That night, as the wind picked up and snow whispered against the windows, Thomas sat in his usual spot, reading softly from a warm collection of poems. Kaya lay curled beside him, paws tucked under her chest, tail flicking occasionally. Outside, the forest was blanketed in silence. Inside, it was full of warmth, full of music, and memory. Kaya let out a small sound, something between a purr and a sigh, and nestled deeper against Thomas's side. She had come from blood and ice. She had watched the world fall apart in a single morning. But here, in this cabin of books and soft blankets and music in the dark, she had found something again. Not just warmth. Home. The snow melted slowly that year, as if reluctant to leave the northern forest behind. Streams once locked in ice began to sing again, weaving through the trees with silver voices. Birds returned to the pines. The scent of wet earth, pine needles, and thawing moss filled the air. Spring had come to Pinewood Forest. And with it came change. Inside the cabin, things had grown restless. Kaya had grown, no longer the fragile kit Thomas had rescued months ago. She had become something strong, sinewy, and sharp. Her legs were longer, her frame more elegant, her stride silent. Her coat had deepened into a rich, golden brown, patterned with dark spots and bars that rippled over her flanks when she moved. She moved a lot now. She rarely sat still. Thomas first noticed it in the mornings, while he made tea and opened the shutters to let the pale light in. Kaya would leap onto the windowsill, eyes narrowed, tail flicking. She watched the world with a hunger he had not seen before, not for food, but for movement. She began to stalk mice in the corner of the cabin, not to eat, just to catch and release. She would crouch for long minutes, completely still, eyes locked on her invisible prey, then spring with a fluid grace that startled even Thomas. One morning, he found her on the rafters, 12 feet above the floor, lounging on the thick wooden beams that lined the ceiling. She looked down at him with calm satisfaction. "You're showing off," he said with a smile. She flicked her tail, and leapt to the bookshelf in a single, terrifying bound. Doors were now left open more often as the weather warmed. Kaya began slipping out. At first, it was just a few feet, a cautious sniff at the garden, a quick trot to the tree stump near the shed. Then longer. She started circling the clearing, moving like a shadow through the underbrush. Thomas didn't stop her. Not truly. How could he? She needed the woods the way birds needed sky. The cabin had been a refuge, but it was not a boundary she could honor forever. Still, every time she slipped out, he waited, and every time, she came back, until the day she didn't. It was early afternoon when she vanished. Thomas had seen her dash across the yard, chasing a red squirrel that had dared descend from the pines. He heard her paws hitting the soil, thump, thump, and the furious squeak of the squirrel's flight. Then, nothing. No return. He waited an hour, then 2, then 4. By evening, he was outside with a lantern, his old boots wet with dew, calling softly into the trees. "Kaya, Kaya, girl, come on home now." Nothing. Just the wind whispering between branches. The forest, in its spring bloom, offered no reply. He returned inside when the sky was ink black, the lantern's flame fluttering with fatigue. His heart was heavy, though he tried to quiet it. Maybe she was just nearby. Maybe she'd found something new to chase. He lit the fire anyway, and left the door ajar. It was close to midnight when he heard the soft thud on the porch. He didn't move at first, just listened. Then came a low sound, familiar and gentle, a chuff. He stood and stepped to the doorway. There she was, framed by moonlight, her coat dappled with dirt and twigs, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. She looked tired but alive. On her left cheek was a fresh scratch, thin but red, trailing down toward her jaw. Something had clawed her, or perhaps she had scraped it in pursuit of something fast and clever. Thomas knelt, holding out a hand. Kaya approached slowly and pressed her head into his palm. But her eyes, those fierce, gold-ringed eyes, were different now. less soft, less domestic. She was changing. Inside, Thomas dabbed the scratch with antiseptic and warm water. Kaya didn't flinch. She let him care for her. But her gaze drifted toward the window often, as if her body sat by the fire. But her spirit was still in the trees. He didn't speak much, just worked in silence. When he was done, she licked his wrist once, then curled near the hearth. He sat beside her, but sleep didn't come. He stared at the flickering flames, remembering the first night she had cried out for her mother in the snow. How small she had been. How broken. He remembered her first steps through the cabin. Her first purr. Her first game of chase the ribbon. He had saved her, but he hadn't tamed her. And that was never the goal. The next morning, Thomas didn't open the door for her. He left it closed, and watched her closely. She paced, not impatiently, just purposefully. Her muscles twitched under her fur. She stopped by the window often. She meowed once, a sharp, short sound, then stared at the trees. That evening, he opened the door again. She walked out without hesitation, and returned by dusk. But the next day, she stayed out longer, and the day after that, longer still. Thomas stopped calling for her. He just waited. It was mid-April when the final sign came. He woke early to a still cabin. The hearth was cold. Kaya wasn't in her usual place. He stepped outside into morning mist. At the edge of the garden, he found fresh tracks in the damp soil, bobcat prints. Deep, confident, leading into the woods. Not wandering, but going. He stood there a long time. Long enough for the sun to rise over the ridge and warm the tips of the trees. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of pine and spring. "She's not gone," he whispered. "She's returning." His heart ached, sharp and strange. Like losing a child. Like setting something free and not knowing if it would ever look back. But it was right. Kaya had been born wild. And the wild had called her home. Morning came gently to the forest. The sun peeked through a lattice of budding branches, scattering light in golden threads across the damp undergrowth. Mist clung to the lower boughs, and the pine needles glistened with dew. Birds sang in quiet bursts, not yet bold enough for full chorus. Everything smelled of sap, soil, and the first breath of a world waking from sleep. Thomas stood by the cabin, his hands folded in front of him. The wooden crate sat in the back of the truck. Its door latched loosely. A soft blanket inside. It was the same crate he'd once used to carry orphaned foxes to a rehab center. Long ago. Now, it held something far more personal. Kaya. She had climbed in herself that morning. No struggle, no resistance, only the quiet understanding that today was different. He had seen it in her eyes when she returned the night before. Still alert. Still wild, but calm in a way that told him she was ready. Truly ready. The drive to the edge of the protected forest was brief. Winding through the gravel road past tall birches and low hills wrapped in ferns and fog. Thomas parked at a clearing surrounded by young maple and alder trees. Their green just starting to deepen. He stepped out slowly, stretched his arms, then walked around to the back. Kaya sat inside, her body still, her yellow eyes watching his every move. He knelt beside the crate and unlatched the small collar she wore, a simple leather strip with no tags. Just a knot he had tied months ago when she began wandering farther. It had never been used to hold her back. It was a formality, a symbol of her time with him. Now, even that would be left behind. He ran a hand gently along her head. She closed her eyes briefly at the touch. "You know what this means," he murmured. She didn't move. He opened the crate door. For a long moment, she didn't exit. She sniffed the air, ears forward, listening. Then, with one smooth movement, she stepped into the grass. Her body was graceful, strong, her legs poised like coiled springs. The dapples in her fur shimmered as she moved forward. One slow, deliberate step at a time. She sniffed the breeze again. Then turned, just once. Their eyes met. It wasn't long, just a heartbeat, but it was enough. Then she turned back toward the trees and ran, not in fear. Not in panic, but with purpose. Her body moved like poetry, fluid, silent, free. She didn't look back again. And Thomas didn't call after her. He stood in the clearing long after she vanished into the woods. The silence settled around him, warm and full. He felt the lump rise in his throat, the kind that came not from grief, but from pride so large it had nowhere else to go. His eyes were red, but he didn't wipe them. He just smiled. "She's not something broken anymore," he whispered aloud to the woods. "She's not something that needed saving." He turned toward the truck and looked at the trees once more. "She's the forest now." The cabin was quiet when he returned. Days passed, then a week. He found himself looking out the window more often, listening at night for sounds in the yard. He knew better than to hope. Kaya had no reason to come back. Her world was larger now, wilder, exactly as it should be. But still, old habits lingered like shadows. He still folded the wool blanket she used. Still left the small bowl near the hearth, just in case. He still caught himself telling stories aloud, halfway through before remembering no one lay beside the fire anymore. But he wasn't lonely, not really. There was something else now. A kind of peace. Then, 2 weeks later, just before sunrise, he stepped onto the porch with a mug of tea and froze. There, on the soft earth just beyond the first step, were paw prints. Small, round, unmistakable. Bobcat. His breath caught. He knelt slowly, squinting at the pattern. They were fresh, made no more than an hour before. They circled once near the porch, lingered by the stacked woodpile, then disappeared toward the path leading deeper into the trees. She hadn't knocked. She hadn't made a sound. But she had come. He chuckled softly, placing his hand next to one of the tracks. Still a good fit. Still her. A quiet hello, he murmured, just checking on the old man. Huh? The tea steamed in his hand. He looked out at the woods, his heart full and light. That evening, as the stars blinked awake in the sky and the winds stirred the chimes gently by the door, Thomas lit the fire and sat in his favorite chair. The room was filled with warmth, with stillness. He reached for a book, but paused. Instead, He leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened to the forest song beyond the walls. A breeze through the birch leaves. A rustle in the underbrush. Somewhere far away, an owl hooted, and in his mind, he could see her, moving through the night, free, unbreakable, home.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.